Hello friends, it's Lex at LexReads. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're going to be talking about the All for the Game series. I have been mentioning this video for a while on my channel because I've been planning it and I've been thinking about it and I've been ruminating on it, and I just barely figured out what I want to say. And even then, I'm not entirely sure that I actually know what I want to say. It's taken me a while to figure it out. So I read The Foxhole Court for my Chandler Ainsley road test video, which was where I sat down and I read some of Chandler Ainsley's favorites and her recommendations, and then I talked about how I felt about them. I compared to how she felt about them, stuff like that, which I'll link down below. And I was expecting to hate this book because logically there is no reason for me to enjoy this series. I don't like sports books. I don't really like mafia books, usually. And it's problematic in a lot of ways, but I'm obsessed with it. I read The Foxhole Court for that video, and something about it just really, really captivated me. And as soon as I could, I bought the next two, read the next two. I've since reread them, and also I just started The Foxhole Court again a week ago today, and I'm only about 25 pages into it because I set it aside to read a couple other books for some other planned videos that I needed to get filmed, but I do plan on reading the rest of it this weekend. So at this point, I've read The Foxhole Court, All for the Game twice, and I'm starting it a third time since February, and it's the middle of April. Now, like I said, I recognize that there's a lot of problematic stuff in this video. There's some slurs and offensive language that's used. There's some incorrect, not ideal representation of mental health and drug misuse and alcohol misuse and sexual assault, and the list goes on, not to mention how wildly outlandish this contemporary is. It feels almost like a fantasy just because it's so wildly out there. And I love it. Oh no. So basically, if you haven't read this book, first of all, there's going to be some spoilers, so maybe it's not for you. But maybe it is for you. I don't know. Anyway, this book is about a boy called Neil Jostin, who has been on the run from his past and his father for 8 years. His father is basically like a crime lord. He's a murderer. And when Neil was about 10, his mom picked him up one day and they went on the run. Right before the book takes place, his mom dies. So by the time the book picks up, he is alone, still on the run, still living his life. But he gets approached by a college XC coach, and XC is a bastard made-up sport that is kind of a combination of like lacrosse, soccer, and hockey. It's kind of strange. I respect the fact that she just made up a whole ass sport for her story, like, mood. Me too. And against his better judgment, Neil signs onto this team, moves to Palmetto State University, and a ton of genuine chaos ensues. But at its heart, I really do think that this made-up sport book is about found family and healing and finding yourself. And yeah. So I very subjectively rated all of these books 5 out of 5 stars because I love them so much. Objectively, they're probably like, for me, like really objectively, if I take my enjoyment out of it and I look at it like just through a technical lens, it's probably a 3 out of 5, but I enjoyed it so much that it bumped it up the whole 2 stars for me. And I like them the most in descending order. So the third book is my favorite, the middle book is my second favorite, and The Foxhole Court is my least favorite of the bunch. Let's talk about some of the things that I like about this story. I love the characters. I really do. They have their issues. It's problematic, but I really do adore all of the characters. I'm going to talk in depth about characters a little bit more later. But most of the things that I love about this book are the characters and the character interactions and the character growth. So that takes a huge chunk of my things I like away. One of my favorite things about the third book, one of the reasons that I love the third book so much, is that a lot of times in books, you have like the real climax in the last 100 pages. I would argue that The King's Men has 2 climaxes. The first one is Baltimore, that whole dealio, and then the second one is the championship game between the Ravens. But I would argue that the Baltimore scene is that whole ordeal is the real climax of the story, which means that the climax of the story is in the middle instead of toward the end, which is really interesting, because then what we get to see is the climax of the book is 250, 300 pages into the book, and then you have about 200 more pages of resolution, because basically the Ravens game is just a very hyped up resolution for the story. And I liked that. That's weird. That's not normal. And I like it because, like I said, at the heart of this story, to me, it's about found family and healing and finding yourself. And that is really, really when we get to see Neil, who is the protagonist, do that, is after what he has considered his main threat in life for his basically whole life is gone. We get to see how he builds a life after that. And I think that is a lot of what makes this series so special to me, is that we don't watch all of his problems go away and then we have 20 more pages of resolution and then hooray, it's over. We have 200 pages of watching the resolution of this story, and I think that was a bold and beautiful and correct choice. Some other things that I like. As mediocre as the writing is, I do actually really like it. I think it's, the point of view is third person limited, which is one of my favorite point of views. I like third person limited because it follows, the one person. So sure, while it's more objective than reading from first person, we get so much of whoever the protagonist or whoever the person, the third person, the narrator, whoever the narrator is following, we get to see so much of them. And Neil is a snarky, sassy little bitch, and I love him. That's one of my favorite things about the series is, the offhanded quips that are Neil wondered, blah, 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 because he's so dumb, and I love him. I usually hate idiot plot, but I do think a good bit of these books are idiot plot, but they're idiot plot in a different way than normal. It's not idiot plot in a way necessarily that propels the plot. Well, Neil's idiot plot is a way that propels the plot forward. If he had just owned up to some things a little bit earlier, I think it would have gone very differently in the last book and a half. But all in all, for me anyway, I just I think their idiocy in general propels their relationships forward. And I love to see it. I just love how stupid Neil Jostin is. He drinks his dumb bitch juice every morning, and I respect him for that. Some things I don't like. I'm going to talk more later about some of the problematic elements of this story, but those are the things, really, that I don't love about the story, is some of the problematic bits. But all in all, one thing I don't love is I tend to like contemporaries that are very grounded in realism. No. There's nothing about this book that is realistic. It did not... I have qualms calling these contemporaries because I just feel like they can't be. I just genuinely feel like you can't call them that because they're so insane. They're insane. They make no sense, and I love them. I don't know. Let's talk about the characters. Like I said, Neil Jostin, he drinks his dumb bitch juice every morning. He's an idiot, and I love him. One of my favorite things about Neil is that he's not a perfect protagonist. He's pretty morally gray in a lot of ways, and I really appreciate that. He makes choices that you as a reader know are just stupid, and you get to watch him do it, and you're like, you're an idiot. And he just owns it. He just owns being dumb. Neil, I'm fine, Jostin is not fine, and he needs a hug, and on good days, Andrew will hug him, and that's all I got. And Nikki, and Matt. Oh, he has so many, and Dan, and he he has so many people that'll hug him. Thank God he can get some hugs, because, oh boy, he's sassy and hot-headed and aggressive and dumb and so traumatized. This poor boy has been through so much, and I think in a lot of ways he's a really relatable character, because sure, while almost no one has gone through the crap that Neil Jostin has gone through, watching his journey of healing and finding himself, at least to me, was really cathartic and made me feel better about a lot of things that I've been through, while my things are, like I said, by no means even comparable to his things. I think he's, in a lot of ways, a very relatable boy, and he's a good being at the heart of it, even though he's dumb. He's dumb. Okay, Andrew Minyard. I recognize that Andrew Minyard is a vaguely homicidal, very traumatized, stabby, emotionally stunted man. And he's my favorite character. Because here's the thing. I have a soft spot in my heart for characters who have been through so much that they build up these collection of walls that are so well built that basically no one can see through them. And I think Andrew Minyard is the textbook definition of that character. He's an abuse survivor. He's a sexual assault survivor. He is a self-harm survivor. If I recall correctly, it is heavily implied that he tried maybe to kill himself. I have such a soft spot in my heart for this man, because while his healing is not linear and he makes a lot of bad choices, and I'm not saying necessarily that he's the best person, he's not the best person. All of these characters are very morally great characters, pretty much, and he is by no means the exception. In fact, he might be one of the worst of the bunch. But the thing that I like about Andrew is, while he's not necessarily the best person, and while he's really morally great, and while he has all of his issues, he is taking active steps towards healing. And he's one of the only characters that we get to watch take active steps towards healing. He goes to therapy every week. And sure, it's mandated, but we see that he really has a deep emotional connection. I'm not going to say love, because that's wrong, but like a deep emotional connection and respect and trust with B, who is the psychiatrist that he and the whole team see. He takes his meds pretty much always. When it's court mandated, he works, especially with Neil, and later Andrew and Nikki and Kevin, he works on improving his relationships and being able to trust them more and moving in the direction of healing. And while I think you obviously could make the argument that Andrew Minyard is not good, not necessarily great, poor mental health rep, they don't romanticize his mental health issues. And I respect that so much. This is a boy that, with bloodied hands and gritted teeth, is aggressively trying to heal in his own ways. And I think getting to watch that happen is one of, in my opinion, the most beautiful things about the book. I love Andrew Minyard, and I would protect him with my whole life. I love his character. So now that I've talked about Andrew for 8 years, I'm going to try and talk a little bit quicker about all the rest of them. Kevin Day. Upon my first reading, I did not like Kevin very much. On my second reading, I was like, what is wrong with me? Kevin is an amazing character, because Kevin is interesting and complex and an alcoholic and trying to deal with his trauma. He, in a lot of ways, I think is, not personality-wise, but an earlier version of Andrew. I think someday we're going to see Kevin, get to the place where Andrew's at now, where with gritted teeth and bloodied nails, he is trying to drag himself towards healing. But we see him way earlier in the process, because he is very, very recently removed from his traumatic experience, which is being a raven, and Rico, and all of that. Okay, fun fact. So I say Rico, but I lent I was reading it with my friend. I convinced my friend to read these books, and she says Rico. It's Rico, right? I'm not losing it. Someone let me know down in the comments. How do you say Rico? But Kevin, not Rico, he's hyper fixated on this sport because it's basically the only thing that he's ever known. And in his old environment, being good at this sport was the only way to get out of the day as unscathed as possible. He is so traumatized. He has probably severe PTSD. He drinks alcohol as a crutch. And I think, like I said, someday I think he's going to heal and get better and have more healthier coping mechanisms. But I have a lot of respect for him. He's an interesting character because we're seeing him deal with the immediate after effects of his trauma. Nikki is hard for me. Nikki is hard for me because I adore Nikki Hemick. I have so much respect for the fact that while he could have gone off to Germany to be with the love of his life, instead he stayed in America to take care of Andrew and Aaron, his cousins, whom he loves so wholeheartedly. He's funny and he's sweet and he has a big heart and he means well and he's trying to do good. My qualm with Nikki is that one time in the first book when he assaults Neil, and then we basically never address that. He genuinely wholeheartedly assaults Neil. He knows that Neil does not want to kiss him. He kisses him anyway. Whilst kissing him, he drugs him. And then we don't ever reconcile it. And so I have this really cognitive dissonance experience where I really like Nikki, but he did something that, in my opinion, so assault is, I can overlook a lot of character flaws, but assault really, really hits me close to home. And it's very hard for me to forgive characters that sexually assault people. And so Nikki Hemick is a lot for me. I hate that so much because I want to love Nikki, but we didn't get enough of a resolution about that. It wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough. Aaron, I feel about Aaron a lot like how I feel about Kevin. The first time I read the series, Aaron was my least favorite character. Upon rereading, I was like, no. Let's hold up a minute. You know who Aaron has a lot in common with? Neil. In a lot of ways. They are both abused by their parents, and poor Aaron, he found out so late in his life that he had a twin brother that his mom didn't want, and he tried to get in contact with him, and Andrew was basically like, go fuck yourself, and he had a good reason. He was trying to protect Aaron, but Aaron didn't know that. And then when he finally got Andrew into his life, Andrew is a shit show and was hard to grow a relationship with. And then they have this deal where Aaron can't find other people that he loves and that support him, basically, other than Andrew and Nikki, and he feels so trapped, and he's been trapped his whole life. And the more I think about Aaron, the more I'm like, you know what? I like Aaron Minyard. So count me into the Aaron Minyard protection squad. Sure, he's an asshole, but basically all of these characters are assholes. So why should I love Aaron any less than I love the rest of them, you know? Matt Boyd deserves all of the rights and all of the love, and he is genuinely one of the kindest good beans. He's the best boy, and we love him. Seriously, though, I adore Matt, and I adore how much Matt cares about his teammates, and how kind-hearted he is, and his jokes, and I feel the same way about Dan. I just love Dan, and I think that Dan and Matt have a really healthy, strong relationship, and I ship them so hard. And I'm so glad that they love each other, and I love them so much, and wow. And I'm so glad that Matt gets to go on and play professional XE. I love that for him, and I love Matt Boyd. I think all of the female characters were not given enough focus. I think she didn't develop the female characters as well as she developed the rest of them, with maybe the exception of Renee. I love Renee's backstory. I think Renee is really interesting as a foil to Andrew because their upbringing is very similar in a lot of ways, and they have a lot in common. And Renee, I think like Andrew, Renee harbors some of this very deep rage. Not even anger, but blinding hot white rage. But looking at how different they are because of circumstance, I think it's really cool. And I love that they're best friends, and I think Renee is a really, really cool character. And I wish we had gotten to see more of her. And I recognize that a lot of that is because Neil and Renee aren't too close. But still, I love Renee. I just think Allison is hilarious and also a badass. I wish we knew more about her. I wish we got more of her. But she's funny, and she's a strong female character, and she doesn't take shit from no man, and I respect that. And Dan is just so cool. Dan is one of the coolest characters in the book for me. She's, like, the only female captain, Division 1 XE captain, and she is, like, so cool, and she's not white, in my brain, at least. I don't actually know if that's, like, a canon thing. In my brain, she is a strong, talented, kind, amazing woman of color. And her and Matt's relationship, as I already said, I love it. I love how strong she is. I love how supportive she is. I love how she runs her team, and I love how she would fight for any of her players, even the ones that don't like her, because she's so committed and so cool, and I love her. Andrew and Neil. Wow, I can't believe Andrew Minyard and Neil Jostin invented love. One of my favorite things about this series is as soon as is in the third book. Before that, they have explicit verbal consent for basically everything. And after in the first book, Andrew drugs Neil, and I haven't reconciled that really either. That whole subplot that happens in the first book really pisses me off, and if I ignore it, I love these books. If I don't ignore it, I get really annoyed. But especially once they're like, they're not this is happening, their relationship that Andrew is convinced isn't a relationship. They trust each other and care about each other so much. And yes or no, every time I ever hear yes or no for the rest of my life, I'm gonna almost cry because of how beautiful their communication is. Because these two emotionally stunted dumbass boys who can't figure their shit out basically ever have created this really cool situation where they can trust and listen to each other. And I think that's beautiful. Andriel is so important to me. They are one of my OTPs of OTPs. I love them. I adore them. I'm so glad that they can help each other heal. And I appreciate that they don't start dating and then are both fixed. Because I feel like that happens a lot in books too. Right, where traumatized people get together and then they're surprised that my love for this man or woman or whoever has healed my trauma. And obviously that is not how the real world works. You don't just start dating someone and your trauma and your baggage goes away. And I like that we get to see them deal with that. And I like that we get to see a softer side of Andrew. And I like to see how much they care about each other. And they just are important to me, okay? I love them. You can fight me about it if you want, but I love them. I could make an entire video just talking about their relationship and how important it is to me because I think it's beautiful. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about extra content. I think there are a few camps when it comes to extra content. I have very strong opinions on extra content, and I feel about extra content the same way that I feel about J.K. Rowling's tweets. I think it's all fine and dandy, and I think authors can say whatever they want to say, and I think that's cool, and I think that's fine, and I think that's well within their rights. However, if it isn't in the canon material, I don't have to take it as canon, because if it isn't in the source material, it's technically not canon. I don't care if it's the author that said it, technically not canon. It's just author-endorsed fan fiction. And so, much like with J.K. Rowling, I, look at the things that Nora Sakavik has added, and some of them I take as oh yeah, that's definitely true. And some of them I'm I just think you're wrong. And I know that that's bold, and I know that that's not really how I should probably approach that, but I'm serious. If you didn't write it into the source material, I don't have to take it as canon. So, I don't know, man. I don't take it as the word of God. That's just my take. That was just a little spiel about extra content, because I don't like authors adding things later, and then me being required to take it as the word of God. That's not my thing. I'm cool with them adding. I actually, in a lot of circumstances, really like it when authors give me little snippets, little peeks into what they would think about characters that they created, because I think that's cool. But also, no. Okay, and the last thing that I want to talk about, I know I said I was going to talk about some of the problematic content. I'm not going to go in detail about what the problematic content is, but I want to talk for a minute about whether or not I think problematic content is okay. You know, there are going to be some things about this story that bother me a lot more than they bother other people, and vice versa. There are going to be things about this story that bother other people a whole lot more than they bother me. But, you know, as I said earlier, I have like a list of things. One of my biggest issues with the way that this series is how the Nikki Neal assault situation is dealt with. That pisses me off. The monsters, drugging people that they're afraid might be threats, that's fucked up, and I don't like it, and as all people should be, am so thoroughly committed to the idea of enthusiastic consent that the idea of doing something to someone against their consent really bothers me. And it also confuses me because it feels really out of character to me that Andrew would do that, considering he has such strong feelings about consent. It just confuses me, and I don't understand why. God, they use, I think, for me, like psycho, like psychopath, psycho, things like monster, like those kinds of things, the things that make that mental health, the mental health bad words don't, you know, like we shouldn't trivialize words like psycho and stuff as an insult. I don't like that, especially since Andrew Minyard is not a psychopath. So, stop. Like, I hate that. Drugging of characters, graphic assault. Graphic assault isn't, that's more of a, like, a content warning, trigger warning kind of thing to me than, like, problematic. In a lot of ways, I appreciate the way that she framed the sexual assault. In a lot of ways, I was not the biggest fan of how she framed sexual assault. It just kind of, you know, like, yike. Some of the characters are literal murderers, like have murdered people. And sure, none of these things are necessarily great and wonderful and flawless and perfect and great, and we should want them in our books. You know, they're problematic. Problematic content, sometimes things that are problematic ruin books for me, and sometimes they don't. And in this one, they didn't. And I want to have a better answer for why than because I enjoyed it so much. I think because for all of the problematic content and all of the things that pissed me off, there are so many things that I love about these characters' interactions and about the character growth and about their relationships and their story arcs and stuff like that, that I can forgive the things that really bother me. I can forgive the whole drugging debacle, which I wish she would have done something different. With my whole heart, I wish she would have done something different. But I can forgive it because we get to watch all of those characters not make up for it, because I don't think you can make up for stuff like that, but we get to watch all of those characters grow as people, and because we get to watch all those characters grow with people, it, like, lessens how angry it makes me. The sexual assault, I don't mind that it's there because I think it adds a lot of depth and explanation to Andrew's character. And I don't know, man. The terms like psycho being used, that just pisses me off, and it just annoys me every time it comes up. I'm like, stop that. Maybe use less derogatory words for people. Stop it. Some of the characters being literal murderers didn't bother me because the rest of this damn book is so outlandish that honestly, who cares if Andrew stabbed someone or whatever? Like, I don't give a shit. Like, if that's the weirdest thing that happens, we're in good shape. It's not the weirdest thing that happens. There's way weirder stuff. So, like, that's really what I'm all like, what about, you know? I don't know. All in all, I love this book series. It's now up there for one of my favorite book series of all time. When I think, like, my favorite book series, now I think, like, the Malice duology and the Hunger Games and All for the Game And I think that's really cool that I found something that, like, really touched me in the way that this did, even if it's so messed up. And it is. Go down in the comments and let's talk about it. What do you guys think? How do you guys feel about the All for the Game trilogy? I want to know. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I know this was a long one. I appreciate it if you listened to the whole thing. Ooh, I have hiccups. Because I know not everyone listens to the whole thing, but thank you guys so much. I will see you tomorrow for another video. Goodbye, friends. Oh, I have hiccups again. How does this keep happening?